Hello and welcome back for your Lab 7 video tutorial. This lab will be working with soils. So the first part here is to understand that soil is a mixture of weathered rock and organic matter that usually covers bedrock, otherwise known as the parent material. Both chemical and mechanical processes are involved in the development of soils. So as an example, we can see that chemical weathering can turn hard minerals into soft ones. Mechanical weathering can break solid rocks into smaller pieces. And also, the decay of organic matter produces acids, which can accelerate chemical weathering. So what I've provided here are a couple sample profiles, meaning that if you were to dig down and look at the sub-level of what's underneath the soil that we stand on, they do vary, as you can see. The first one here, as you can see, it has these letters A, B, C, and then bedrock. This one has an O and different spaces and different drawings. The reason being is because not every environment is the same. So as an example, I'll use this diagram on the bottom left to explain this. O horizons don't always exist. The O horizon stands for organics, meaning that's broken up leaves and twigs and branches. That's just rich organic laying on top. In this particular drawing, we don't have an O horizon. Maybe you live by the ocean, beach front property with just sand. You're not going to have a rich O horizon. So again, these do vary. A horizons. A horizons I usually consider topsoil. It's really dark and rich in nutrients, kind of stinky. Topsoil, like that stuff you buy at Home Depot in the big bags. B is identified as being a subsoil, which contains the minerals and matter that have been transported deeper by groundwater. Most of the clay in the soil has been washed down to this layer. Lastly, we move here to the C horizon. C horizons are often a mixture of the parent material and material thereof. Um, if you were to dig down a hole, you finally get to a point where you start coming into these really large rocks and boulders. You've reached your C horizon. And then down here below it, this diagram has it labeled as D. I've seen it labeled as R in our textbook. It's essentially the bedrock. It's the bottom, the lowest layer. That is solid rock material. Moving forward, we can see here some different horizons. This activity here is having you order them. First, identify what horizons are which. So as an example, this would be your R or parent horizon. And then you have all these different, a layer here. This one has 3, this one has, so on and so forth. Your idea here is to first identify the layers or the horizons, then to put them in order. Which do you think happened first, second, and third? If you get kind of stuck on this, be sure to check out the videos posted within the modules. Moving forward, we have the soil texture triangle of science. This is when identifying soil. There's many different ways we can do it. We can identify it based off of its acidity, or whether it's acidic or basic. We could also classify it based on color, as we'll see in a moment, or we can do it based off of its texture. If we look at the texture in particular, we're looking at the material that is there being either sand, silt, or clay, so no organics in this case. So as an example, we can see you have sand, clay, and then silt. The arrows show the direction in which the lines are going. So as an example, maybe we have a sample that is perhaps 30% sand. Well, I go down here to sand, 30% is there, and I can draw my line going all the way up this way. That represents 30% sand. Maybe it's also 30% clay. Well, here's clay, 30% is a horizontal line. And then I see that those two lines merge there. Lastly, silt is 40%. Perfect, perfect. All 3 lines intersect in one point. As you can see, this box has been identified as a clay loam, and that would be the value of that sample. That being said, you're going to solve these here. Excellent. Find the name, find the name. Great. Well, what's interesting is now you get to some that are missing numbers. Well, how do we find those numbers? It's pretty easy. It's based off of percentages, which means the maximum value is 100%. So 75 plus 10 plus 15 is 100%. So to find that missing value, you add 42 plus 37, and you subtract that from 100, and you'll find the missing value. After completing that, you are to download a soil chart. I've given you a link within the modules on how to do that. It's a free application. It can be done on an iPad, or it can be done on your tablet or any device that you've got. and it's going to teach you about the different spectrum of color. It's very similar to a color wheel. Munsell created the color wheel for art, where we look at these certain pieces. You have the hue, the value, and the chroma. The hue is the spectral rainbow, so Roy G. Biv. Then you have the value, which is defined as relative blackness to whiteness. And then the chroma is designated as more of the saturation, so more of the grayscale or pastel. So that being said, your job will be to identify 4 samples of soil in your environment. So wherever you can find 4 samples of soil that you can test, you can use up to 2 that you found online, but I need you to find an actual soil because you're going to take photos of it and put it together in a Word document for additional points for this lab. You're then going to use the color wheel or the color app and try to match the color with the sample you found. And then once you've done so, you can write the code within the lab. So as an example, I know this is a black and white diagram, but let's say that this happens to be the color. Maybe your soil is a pale brown. Well, we find that it has a hue of 10 yellow reds and has a value of 6/3. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means if I have my color diagram, I pull it up and I know exactly the color you mean when you represent that code. Think of this kind of like at Home Depot or Lowe's, and you go and see all the different paint swabs that are there. All those little swatches have codes on the back. So I can take that code to any other place and say, this code is the color I need, and they can replicate that code. So what you'll do with those 4 samples you picked, you will first identify whether it's sand, silt, or clay, and what percentages, and give it its name, and then identify the hue, value, chroma, and then the code is all 3 of these put together. To learn how to better do this sand, silt, clay value, go back into the modules underneath the objectives and the directions for this week. I provided a diagram that you can use to help identify. Essentially what it's done is by putting it in your hand, the material, getting just a little bit of water on it and then rubbing it around your hand. The grittier it is, the more sand it is. The more cakey it is together, the more clay, and the more smooth it is, the more silt. The last part of this activity is kind of like a deep thought question. Below are 3 soil profiles, the first being identified as traditional. The second one is being a tropical rainforest. And then I have one that's blank. This one's blank because I want you to draw what you would think in an environment that would be post-deforestation. Once you draw your horizons, explain why certain layers have been eliminated and certain layers have been added. After you're done with all of that, go ahead and submit your lab. Don't forget to submit your photo of the 4 soils that you used to complete this activity, and we'll talk soon.